Good day, everyone. Our assigned topic is about the historical foundation of education. Let's have an introduction first. The beliefs and experiences of education today rest on the history of this field of endeavor. By knowing what accomplishment of the leaders in the past, today's educators attempt to build on their achievement. It means that the education that we are experiencing right now is a product of the past way of educating our children. The beliefs and experiences we have today is actually the product of how our parents are being educated in the past. And it also means that the happenings in the past have an impact of what is happening now in the present. Let me ask these two questions first. How did education evolve? How did Philippine education evolve? These will be related to primitive education, Egyptian education, Greek education with Spartan, Athenian, and later education, and lastly is the Roman education. So let's talk first primitive education. It is the way of life. So primitive education is only applicable in primitive society in the means of enculturation. So enculturation means it is the process of cultural transmission. So life among primitive or tribal people was very simple compared to the complex life that people have today. Their means of livelihood were hunting, gathering wild fruits and vegetables. So in primitive education, reading and writing is not yet exist. The transmission of information is through conversation, words of mouth, songs, gestures, ceremonial rites, and others. So the kind of education they have is informal or unstructured. The aims of primitive education are security and survival from dangers that could be inflicted by natural phenomena like typhoons, floods, earthquakes, and others. The next is conformity. The interest of one was sacrificed for the interest of the others. The next is preservation and transmission of traditions. It is their culture is being enhanced and preserved for the next generation. Here are some characteristics of primitive culture. The first is relatively simple, relatively narrow social and cultural contacts. Second is the extraordinary, conservative, and prone to superstitions, like they are holding traditional values. Next is the organization of primitive life is tribal, not political, so that one function of education is to enable one to live with his relatives. The last is absence from primitive culture of reading and writing. Yes, it's because, as what I've said a while ago, reading and writing is not yet exist in the primitive education. So the types of education they have are vocational and religious. So vocational education, it is like they enhance their skills in hunting and constructing a hut. In religious, it is learning on how to participate in ritualistic practices to appease the unseen spirit. The next is the content to be studied, ways of procuring the basic necessities in life and of protecting life from dangers. And the second is superstitious. It deals on how to worship before dwelling of an unseen spirit such as big tree, big rock, a river, or a big bush. The effects of primitive education are first, culture was passed on and preserved for a generation. Yes, it is being preserved for generation to generation. It's because they are a culture based society. The second is tribes were able to meet their economic needs and were able to survive. Yes, because they are just living in a simple life only and they can survive without money. The third is people were able to adjust and adapt to social and political life. The next to primitive education is Egyptian education. Egyptian education is to educate young mind in various subjects. So Egypt, the gift of the Nile, is situated in the northern part of the African continent. Ancient Egypt was a desert country watered by the Nile River, which flooded the country from August to October, leaving behind a very rich black earth. And Egypt is being ruled by King Pharaoh. They are into the obedience and loyalty of their king, who has an absolute power. The aims of Egyptian education are training of scribes. The second is religious. They inculcate proper respect for the god and the pharaoh. And the third is utilitarian. They aim for the betterment of the society as a whole. And the last is the preservation of cultural patterns. The types of education they have are first, religious education. It is to inculcate in the minds of the children or learners on how to do proper respect for the gods. The next is vocational professional education. It is they wanted to perpetuate the artistic skills of the people in Egypt's society. The next is military education. It is a process which intends to establish and improve the capability of military personnel in their respective roles for them to become prepared and can protect their society in danger. The next is public administration. It is for those people who aspired for positions in government. The next is priesthood education for those who aspire to become priests. Home arts education is a vocational and it is offered by women. The content need to be studied are reading, writing and language, religious and secular literature, artistry and metals and lapidary, mathematics, especially geometry and surveying. And there are also subjects that are something related to science, to music and sports. So, what are the contribution of Egyptian education in today's education? It is on geometrical measurement and surveying. It is on numbers. The knowledge are actually from Egyptian education practices. The next to Egyptian education is Greek education. Greek are a mixture of two great races which are Aryan and Germanic people, but they are being isolated because of the presence of the natural barriers such as mountain and bodies of water. And they also develop differences. So there were many Greek city-state, but two of them rose above all others. So these were Sparta and Athens. So let's talk first Spartan education. So Sparta was in the south of the Corinth in the southern section of Peloponnesian Peninsula. Spartan education was based upon the loss of Lycurgus. It was the basis of the Spartan political, social, and educational system. So Spartan education mainly focused on military training. So the aims of Spartan education are military and discipline. So military is to develop an equal in military skill and absolute being devoted and loyal to the state. The next is discipline. It is their aim to produce an ideal Spartan citizen who was capable of enduring hunger, thirst, torture, and even death. So the content need to be studied are intensive gymnastic and parliamentary exercises, reading and writing, practical in moral and social habits. And also music with serious, moral and martial rhythm to arouse patriotism. Next is speech had to be laconic and terse. And last is for girls gymnastic to make them strong to bear strong children. The next to Spartan education is the Athenian education. So Athenian education is mainly focused on arts and skills such as speaking and writing. Their contribution to education are they are into literature, drama, history, and philosophy. The aims of Athenian education are good citizenship, individual excellence, in wisdom, beauty, and strength for public usefulness. And last is demand-sided development. It is there was a freedom to develop all human capacities. The types of education they have are first is civic training. It is the desire to serve the state. And the second is moral training. It is nurturing the children those virtues and values that make them good people. Physical education. And the next is intellectual education, an education that teach the students on how to organize their minds, ideas, and thoughts to make sense of the world that they are living. And last is art. An example of art is music, poetry, and dancing. The contents that need to be studied are: first, reading by the alphabet method; and second, writing on wax and tablets; the third, arithmetic for market use; fourth, homework and other poems; fifth, gymnastic exercises; sixth, physical education exercises; and last is the military training subjects. The last of Greek education is the later Athenian education. Athens became an empire in 479 before Christ, when Greeks defeated the Persians at the Battle of Plataea. Athens, the head of the Delian Confederation, contributed largely to the victory. The triumph brought about attitudinal changes toward education among Athenians. So the aims of Athenian education are: first is by the sophist, pragmatic and utilitarian. It is to prepare individual for personal advancement. The next is by Socrates, development of the power of thinking. It is to enable humanity to arrive at fundamental concept or moral principles of the universe, and to establish that morality is based on knowledge and virtue. And the third is by Plato, controlled by individual rulers. It is to produce social order and to develop the individual's natural talent. And the third is by Aristotle, the rational living. It is to direct society in the way which affects the greatest good of mankind, whose goal is happiness. The type of education they have are: first, moral training. It is to nurture the children these virtues and values. The next is the professional training. It is to train their people on how to do public speaking. The next is intellectual training. It is for the individuals to organize their minds, ideas, and thoughts. And the next is vocational training. It focuses on the skills required for a particular job, like for craftsmen. And the next is domestic training, for those girls for housekeeping purposes only. And there is also physical, military, and civic training. Sports and games is for enjoyment. There is also science for teaching logic, is aesthetics, especially literature, grammar, rhetoric, art, and music. The content to be studied are: for lower elementary level, reading, writing, arithmetic, poetry, and gymnastics. And for the higher elementary level, physical and military exercises, grammar, declamation, argumentation, and public speaking. And for the secondary schools, geometry, astronomy, drawing, grammar, and rhetorics. And for the higher level are philosophy, mathematics, and science. The outstanding contributions to education and humanity are: the Socratic method of teaching. As far as the method is concerned, Socratic method, it is the question and answer portion. For example, it is the oral recitation. Another is the realm of philosophy. So the greatest world philosophers came from Greece, among whom were Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and others. Another is in the field of mathematics. The Euclidean geometry has been studied for 2,000 years up to the present. So Euclidean geometry is a mathematical system that is being attributed to Alexandrian Greek mathematician Euclid. And the last is art and classical literature are also great contributions.